gas station bathroom off I-91 smelled like bleach and bad decisions, which felt appropriate given that I had just taken 3 pregnancy tests in the same stall, and all 3 said yes, with what I can only describe as aggressive confidence. I sat on the edge of the sink. Don't judge me, the floor was not an option, and stared at the little plastic stick in my gloved hand. 2 lines. You know what? I said to my own reflection. I didn't even want this much drama in my life. I had a plan. The plan was leave Denver, eat something that wasn't gas station sushi, and never think about any of those 3 alphas again. The reflection didn't offer anything useful back. My name is Elliot Voss. I'm 24 years old. I'm an Omega, and as of approximately 11 minutes ago, I was also a man carrying twins. Twins. Not 1, 2. Like my body looked at my life and decided, you know what this situation needs? More. I pulled off my left glove with my teeth and touched the edge of the sink with 2 bare fingers. The flash hit me immediately. A maintenance worker, 2 weeks prior, annoyed and exhausted, scrubbing this exact surface while thinking about his daughter's school recital he was going to miss. A woman before him, crying quietly, pressing her phone to her chest like it was the only warm thing left. I yanked my glove back on. That is the thing about being a psychometrist. Every surface tells a story whether I want to hear it or not. One touch and I feel the full emotional weight of whoever was last there. Fear, grief, love, rage. All of it lands in my chest like someone dropped a brick from a 4-story window. I spent most of my life wearing gloves because of it. Thin leather in summer, thicker ones in winter. People thought it was a quirk. My old pack thought it was an affectation, the kind of thing an Omega did to seem interesting. My old pack. Right. I exhaled slowly through my nose and looked down at the 3 tests lined up on the edge of the sink, like evidence in a case I did not want to prosecute. Denver felt very far away. I had left 6 days ago with 1 bag, my gloves, $73 in cash, and a very specific conversation I was trying to stop hearing on a loop inside my head. I took a Greyhound bus to Kansas City, then another to Columbus, then a rideshare to New Haven, Connecticut because I opened a map, closed my eyes, and pointed. New Haven, population approximately 130,000. Distance from Denver, 1,900 miles. Close enough to feel like progress. Far enough that no alpha in the Callaway pack would think to look for me here. That was the theory anyway. The Callaway pack. I still could not say the name without something pulling tight behind my ribs. Marcus Callaway, Pack Alpha, 31 years old, broad-shouldered, the kind of man who walked into a room and rearranged the emotional gravity of it without trying. He had a voice like low thunder, warm when he chose to be, which was not often, and devastating in exactly the ways he did not intend. Jasper Reed, his second, 29, sharp-tongued and generous in the same breath. The only one who ever asked me what I was thinking, instead of assuming he already knew. He had this way of tilting his head when he listened, like he was making room for what you said, like your words mattered enough to deserve actual space. And then Declan Harlow, quiet, 28, who made coffee at 6 in the morning every single day and always left a second cup on the counter without saying a word about it. Like he knew I would be awake. Like he always knew where I was in a room without looking. 3 alphas, 1 pack house in the Denver foothills, 1 Omega they apparently did not find particularly necessary. My fingers tightened around the pregnancy test. I told myself the whole bus ride that I was not hurt. I repeated it in a McDonald's parking lot in Kansas City at 2 in the morning while eating fries I did not taste. I whispered it to myself in the dark of a Columbus motel room where the heater made a sound like a dying cat. Not hurt, just informed, just making a calm, rational decision based on accurate information. The accurate information being, I had stood outside Marcus's office door 6 days ago, raised my fist to knock, and heard his voice on the other side of the wood. clear as a bell, unbothered as a man who had never once worried about being overheard in his own home. The Omega means nothing. He is a convenience. Don't make it complicated. 3 seconds of silence that felt like a full calendar year. Then Jasper's voice, lower. He has been here 4 months. So? Marcus, flat, final. The conversation already over before Jasper finished the sentence. I had stood there with my knuckles 1 inch from that door and felt the words land in my chest exactly the way my psychometry did. No warning, no buffer, straight through. Then I turned around, walked to my room, packed 1 bag, and left. I did not cry until Kansas City. Now I was standing in a gas station bathroom in New Haven, holding proof that the convenience had consequences. Twins. I pressed my gloved palm flat against the cold wall beside the mirror and breathed the way Dr. Anila Rowe had taught me back when the psychometry used to drop me to my knees at grocery stores. Breathe in. Name 1 thing you can feel. Breathe out. Name 1 thing you know for certain. What I could feel. Cold tile under my boots, the faint chemical sting in the air, and a small, persistent flutter low in my stomach that I had been calling stress for 3 weeks and could no longer pretend I believed. What I knew for certain. I was 24 years old. I was alone. I was in New Haven, Connecticut, and somewhere inside me, 2 lives had already decided to stay. I looked at my reflection for a long moment. The dark circles, the jaw set tight, the gloves. Okay, I said, quiet and very serious. New plan. I tucked the tests into my jacket pocket, pulled my hood up, and pushed through the bathroom door into the gray Connecticut morning. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I did not look at it. I already knew, the way I sometimes knew things before they fully arrived. The way my psychometry bled into something sharper on days when I was frightened. The same cold certainty that had pulled me awake at 3 a.m. twice on the bus, breathless, seeing fragments of a room I recognized. A coffee cup on a granite counter, pale gold morning light through tall windows, a figure standing very still with 1 hand pressed flat against the edge of the counter, head down. Declan's kitchen. Denver. Him, not moving, like he was holding himself together through sheer force of staying in one place. I pressed my lips together and kept walking, 2 pink lines in a future I had not planned, pressing quiet and insistent against my ribs, like a question I did not have the answer to yet. New Haven in early November had a specific kind of cold that felt personal, not the dry, high-altitude cold of Denver that I had grown up with, the kind that bit clean and left you alone about it. This was East Coast cold, humid, the kind that found the gap between your collar and your jaw and moved in like it paid rent. I pulled my hood tighter with 1 gloved hand and studied the street in front of me. Chapel Street was waking up slow, a coffee shop with fogged windows, a bakery pushing warm air out through a prop door, a man walking a dog that looked deeply unimpressed by the morning. Normal. Quiet. Nothing that knew my name or my scent, or the specific sound of Marcus Callaway's voice saying the word convenience like it weighed exactly nothing. My phone buzzed again. I took it out this time because ignoring it a second time felt like the kind of discipline I did not currently have the bandwidth to maintain. The notification was not from any of the 3 numbers I had half expected. It was from the New Haven housing listings app I had downloaded somewhere between Columbus and the Connecticut border at approximately 4 a.m. while running on gas station coffee and poor judgment. 1 new match, studio apartment, Wooster Square neighborhood, available immediately, utilities included, month-to-month lease. I stared at it. Month-to-month, utilities included, available immediately. That was either fate or a scam, and given the current trajectory of my life, I was genuinely willing to accept either outcome. I typed back a message requesting a viewing and kept walking. Here is what I had going for me, objectively, standing on a sidewalk in Connecticut with 3 positive pregnancy tests in my jacket pocket and $73 that had since become 41. 1. I had a skill, a real one, separate from the psychometry, which was less a skill and more a deeply inconvenient biological condition. I was a licensed structural assessor. I had spent 2 years before Denver doing building evaluations for insurance companies, reading stress fractures in old walls and compression failures in foundations. It was the kind of work I could do anywhere with a laptop and a contact list, and it paid well enough that 4 months inside a pack house had not erased my professional existence entirely. 2. I was, by any reasonable measure, not a person who collapsed under pressure. I had been presenting as an Omega since 19. I had been psychometric since birth. I had navigated a world not designed for either of those things, and I was still standing, in good boots, with a plan that was actively forming as I walked. 3. I was funny. This is not a small thing. Humor is a survival mechanism, and I had refined mine to a sharp, quiet edge over years of practice. It did not always help, but it helped more than crying in public, which I had already done twice on this trip and was not planning to repeat. What I did not have going for me, also objectively: 1. $41. 2. Twins. 3. The fact that the scent hit me before I even turned the corner. I stopped walking. It was subtle. That was the cruel thing about it. Not a wave, not an assault, just a thread of something warm and familiar, woven into the cold morning air, like someone had hidden it there on purpose. Cedar and something darker underneath, like rain-soaked earth after a storm. A scent that had no business being in New Haven, Connecticut, on a sidewalk outside a bakery at 7:40 in the morning. My whole body went very still. The rational part of my brain said, "You are sleep-deprived, emotionally compromised, and currently experiencing a significant hormonal shift due to circumstances that involve twins. You are imagining things. Cedar is not a rare smell. Plenty of people smell like rain and cedar. Move your feet." My Omega biology said, "That is Declan Harlow, and he is close." I turned slowly. The man standing at the bakery counter inside the fogged window was not Declan. He was shorter, different build, darker jacket. He had a paper bag in one hand, and he was laughing at something the woman behind the counter said. I let out a breath that left my chest feeling hollowed out. Not Declan. Of course not Declan. Declan was in Denver, standing at his kitchen counter, in a vision that my own exhausted, psychometric brain had generated to torture me. He was not here. None of them were here. I turned back around and walked directly into a wall, except the wall was warm and it said, "Hey," and it had hands that caught my elbows before I hit the ground. And when I got my bearings and looked up, it was not a wall at all. It was a man approximately 6'2", with a jaw like a topographic feature, and dark eyes that were currently looking down at me with an expression caught somewhere between concern and the specific wariness of someone who had just been run into at speed by a hooded stranger. He was an alpha. I knew it the way every Omega knew it. The register of his scent, the particular steadiness in the way he stood, the almost imperceptible expansion of presence that alphas could not entirely suppress, even when they were clearly trying to be non-threatening about it. This one smelled like pine resin and black coffee and something dry and clean like linen. Nothing like cedar. Nothing like Denver. "You good?" he said. "Completely," I said. "Totally on purpose. I do that." His mouth pulled at one corner. Not quite a smile, more like the beginning of one that he decided to be cautious about. "You walked into me." "I am aware of the sequence of events, thank you." He looked down at my gloved hands, which he was still holding by the wrists since the near fall, then back up at my face. There was no aggression in it, no territorial instinct flaring, just a look that was, if I was being fair about it, almost carefully neutral, like he was making a deliberate choice to take up only the space he was entitled to, which was, I had to admit, a more unusual quality in an alpha than it should have been. He let go of my wrists. "Sorry," he said. "I should have been paying attention." "You were standing still." "Yeah," he said. "Still should have seen you coming." I looked at him for one beat too long and immediately looked away, which was embarrassing, so I covered it by pulling my glove straighter at the wrist with the focused energy of someone who had very important gloves to attend to. "Elliot," I said, because for reasons I could not fully explain, giving him my name felt less dangerous than the alternative, which was turning around and fleeing down Chapel Street like a man with something to hide. He was quiet for a half second. "Cole," he said. "Cole Mercer." Not a pack name I recognized. Good. My phone buzzed in my pocket. The housing app. A reply. "Viewing available in 40 minutes. 14 Wooster Place. Ask for Rena." I looked up. Cole Mercer was watching me with those carefully neutral eyes, and I had the sudden, uncomfortable awareness that my scent had shifted in the last 60 seconds, in a way I could not entirely control, because that was the other delightful feature of early Omega pregnancy that no one in any biology class had thought to adequately prepare me for. The scent spike. Warm and distinctive and pointed like a finger at a crime scene. I took one step back. "I have to go," I said. "Apartment viewing. Very exciting chapter in my life. You know how it is." Cole Mercer did not say anything for a moment. Then, "There's a good diner 2 blocks up on Orange Street if you need breakfast. Best scrambled eggs in New Haven. Tell them Cole sent you." I stared at him. "I don't know you," I said. "No," he agreed, easy, like this was not a strange thing to say to a stranger you had known for 90 seconds. "But you look like you haven't eaten a real meal in a while, and the eggs are genuinely very good." I opened my mouth, closed it. Somewhere in my chest, underneath the exhaustion and the cold, and the 3 positive tests still pressing against my ribs, something shifted. Small, almost invisible. The emotional equivalent of a crack in a foundation wall. The kind that looks minor until you understand what it means. I turned and started walking toward Wooster Square. I did not look back. My pulse, however, had not quite returned to its normal speed, and my psychometry was sending up very small, insistent sparks at the fingertips of my gloves, the way it sometimes did when I was near something that was about to matter. I hated that feeling. I kept walking anyway. Wooster Square was 4 blocks east, and I found it the way I found most things when I was running on minimal sleep and maximum stubbornness. By refusing to stop moving until something recognizable appeared in front of me. The square itself was a small park ringed by old brownstones and bare November trees, the kind of neighborhood that looked like it had decided decades ago to be charming and had simply never reversed that decision. Wrought iron fences, a white church at the far end, a pizza place that was not open yet, but already smelled like something worth coming back for. Number 14 was a narrow brownstone on the south side of the square. Red brick, black door, a small buzzer panel beside the entrance with handwritten labels in 3 different inks. I pressed the button for Unit 1, which the app had listed as the building manager. A voice crackled through. "Yeah? Hi, I'm here about the studio. I messaged about a viewing. Elliot Voss." A pause, then, "Come up, 1st floor, end of the hall. Doors open." The lock clicked and I pushed inside. The hallway smelled like old wood and lemon cleaner, and faintly like someone had been cooking something with garlic recently, which was the most comforting combination of scents I had encountered in 6 days. I walked to the end of the hall and knocked on the open door. The woman who looked up from behind a cluttered desk was somewhere in her 50s, dark natural hair pinned back, reading glasses on a beaded chain around her neck, wearing an expression that suggested she had heard every possible story a prospective tenant could offer and had opinions about all of them. "Rena Okafor," she said, not standing. "You're the one who messaged at 4:30 in the morning." I was in a different time zone emotionally, I said. She looked at me over the rim of her glasses. Then she stood up. Studio's on the 3rd floor. Let's go. The apartment was small, honestly small. 1 room, a galley kitchen against 1 wall, a bathroom with a clawfoot tub that was either charming or a structural liability, and I could assess that professionally if pressed. 1 window faced the square and let in a clean rectangle of gray morning light that hit the wood floor at an angle that made the whole room look like a painting somebody had started and left to dry. I stood in the center of the room and did not touch anything with my bare hands, which was a habit so automatic I barely registered it. Month to month, Rena said from the doorway, arms folded. First and last up front. No parties, no pack business conducted on premises. I've had 2 territorial disputes in this building, and I am not interested in a 3rd. No pack, I said. Just me. She studied me with the focused assessment of someone who had been reading people for decades. Her eyes went to my gloves, then to my face, then briefly and without comment to my midsection, in the way that people with sharp instincts sometimes looked when their biology was telling them something their manners prevented them from saying out loud. I kept my expression completely neutral. References? She said. 2. Both will answer on the first call. When do you need the space? Today, if possible. Another pause. Rena unfolded her arms and pulled a key from her cardigan pocket, the kind of woman who kept keys in her pocket as a general philosophy of preparedness. She held it out. First and last. I'll take a check or transfer. You skip out on rent, I keep the deposit and your mail. We understand each other? Completely, I said. She dropped the key in my glove palm and walked back down the hall without another word, and I stood in the middle of my new apartment in New Haven, Connecticut, $41 to my name, twins in my future, and a key in my hand that was already warm from someone else's pocket. I looked around the room. Okay, I said to no one. Step 1 complete. My phone buzzed. This time, it was not the housing app. The name on the screen was Jasper Reed, and I looked at it for exactly 4 seconds before I turned the phone face down and set it on the kitchen counter. I pressed both gloved palms flat on the counter edge instead, a grounding technique, and stared at the wall in front of me. Jasper. Calling. Which meant at least one of them had noticed I was gone, which should not have felt like anything at all, and instead felt like a hand pressing directly on the bruise I had been carefully not acknowledging for 6 days. The thing about Jasper was that he was the one who had said, 4 months, like it meant something, like it was worth pointing out. His voice had been lower than Marcus's, careful, the way Jasper got when he was navigating something he wasn't sure how to handle. He has been here 4 months. In Marcus. So? I picked the phone back up, looked at the missed call notification, and typed a single text. I'm fine. Please don't call again. I sent it before I could think about it long enough to change my mind, put the phone back down, and walked to the window. The square below was getting busier. A woman jogging with a stroller, 2 men in work jackets cutting across the park on their way somewhere, a kid on a bike doing loops around the fountain, which was shut off for winter, the basin dry and leaf-filled. Normal, ordinary, New Haven doing what cities did, going about its business without any awareness that I was standing in a 3rd-floor window, watching it with the specific emotional stillness of a man trying very hard not to feel something. My psychometry pulsed at my fingertips. Not a vision, just the familiar low-level warmth of it, like a signal searching for a frequency. It had been doing that since I touched the sink at the gas station. Since I had the fragment of Declan in his kitchen, I recognized the feeling. It meant I was close to something that carried emotional weight, something in the recent vicinity that my ability was trying to pull into focus. I looked down at the square. Cole Mercer was standing on the path below, coffee in hand, looking up, not at my window specifically, at the building. He had the look of someone who lived nearby and was simply passing, except that he had stopped, which people on their way somewhere generally did not do. My jaw tightened. I took one deliberate step back from the window. This was not something I was going to engage with. I had enough variables. I had a new apartment, a failed professional situation to rebuild, $41, a medical situation requiring immediate attention, and a pack 3 states away that I was not thinking about. I did not have room in any of that for a tall alpha with pine resin scent and disconcertingly good instincts about scrambled eggs. My phone buzzed again. I looked at it. Jasper. Not a call this time. A text. Elliot. Just tell me you're safe. That's all I'm asking. I stared at it. The terrible thing, the genuinely inconvenient thing, was that of all the possible messages he could have sent, that was the exact one most engineered to get through my defenses. Not, where are you? Not, come back. Just, are you safe? Like he already knew I wasn't coming back and had adjusted his request accordingly. I closed my eyes for 2 seconds. Safe, I typed back. Don't look for me. Sent. I put the phone in my jacket pocket, picked up my single bag from the floor, and set it on the counter with the focused energy of someone beginning the process of making a space their own, which was a thing I had not done since before Denver, since before the pack house and its tall windows and its coffee left on counters and its alphas who apparently used words like convenience in private conversations. The psychometry sparked again, warmer this time, more directed. I looked at the apartment door. There was a knock. I went very still. A beat of silence. Then a voice through the wood, careful and unhurried. I brought coffee, and before you say anything, I live 2 buildings over and I saw you go in, and I wanted on record that this is not a thing I normally do. Mercer. I looked at the ceiling with the expression of a man appealing to a higher power that had consistently let him down. I didn't give you my address, I said through the door. Rena's my neighbor, he said. She texted me. Her exact words were, young man, 3rd floor, your type of stubborn, come be useful. I pressed my lips together. I was going to have opinions about Rena Okafor and her unsolicited interventions. But the coffee smelled real through the gap under the door, and I had not had real coffee since Columbus. And my body, currently hosting 2 uninvited passengers, had apparently decided that coffee was a non-negotiable requirement of continued cooperation. I opened the door. Mercer stood in the hallway holding 2 paper cups with the expression of a man who had correctly calculated that the door would open, but was not going to be smug about it. Oat milk, he said, holding one out. Rena said you look like an oat milk person. I am not an oat milk person, I said. Okay. I am a black coffee person. The oat milk one is better. I took the oat milk one. He did not smile, but something in his eyes shifted, easy and warm, like something clicking into place without making a sound. I'm not looking for a pack, I said, direct and clear, because I believed in managing expectations before they became problems. I don't have one, he said, just as direct. I looked at him. He looked back. I have $41, I said, because this felt relevant. The eggs this morning were on me, he said, if you'd taken me up on it. My psychometry was doing something loud and insistent at my fingertips now, the kind of pulse that usually meant, stop here, this matters, pay attention. I took a sip of the oat milk coffee. It was, in fact, better. I hated that most of all. I stood in the doorway of my empty apartment, holding a coffee cup I had not asked for, looking at a man I had known for approximately 40 minutes, and tried to locate the version of myself that had reasonable boundaries and a functional sense of self-preservation. That version was apparently still on a Greyhound bus somewhere in Ohio. You can't come in, I said. I wasn't planning to, Cole said. Good, he agreed. We stood there. You have no furniture, he observed, looking past me at the empty room with the diplomatic neutrality of someone choosing not to make it a problem. I have a bag, I said, and a key, and coffee. That is a furnished apartment in my current financial bracket. His mouth did the almost smile thing again, that careful pull at the corner that he kept choosing not to commit to. I have a folding chair, two actually, they're clean. I don't need your folding chairs. Okay. I'm serious. I know, he said easy. I'll leave them outside your door. He turned and walked back down the hallway before I could construct an argument against this, which was tactically very sound of him and annoyed me on a fundamental level. I shut my apartment door. Then I stood with my back against it and looked at my empty room and drank the oat milk coffee, which was warm and slightly sweet and tasted like something a person who was being taken care of would drink, and I deeply resented what that did to the muscle behind my sternum. My phone buzzed. Marcus, not a text this time, a call. His name sitting on my screen in plain letters like it had no idea what it had done. I watched it ring. 4 rings. 5. 6. Voicemail. I did not listen to the voicemail. I opened my contacts instead, scrolled to his name, and blocked it with the calm, deliberate energy of someone completing an administrative task. Then I blocked Jasper's number. Then Declan's, because Declan had not called or texted, but I was not going to leave that door cracked on the grounds that hope was a structural hazard. Done. Clean. Necessary. I drank my coffee. My psychometry pulsed. It was coming from the wall to my left. Not sharp, not urgent, just a low, persistent warmth, the way it felt when an object nearby carried something recent and emotionally significant. I turned and looked at the wall. The building was old, the kind of old that meant the walls remembered things. I was not going to touch them with bare hands and find out what. There was a sound in the hallway, a soft scrape of metal on wood, then footsteps retreating. I waited 30 seconds, opened the door and looked down. 2 folding chairs, aluminum, clean, leaning against the wall in matching diagonal lines, like they were trying to look unobtrusive. I looked at them for a moment, then I picked them up, carried them inside, and set them up facing the window. I sat in one and looked out at Wooster Square with my coffee and my gloves and my twins and my block contacts, and tried to take stock of what an actual plan looked like from here. The structural assessment work was viable. I had 2 former clients who would send referrals if I reached out today. New Haven had a dense stock of pre-war residential buildings and at least 3 insurance companies with regional offices in Connecticut that I knew from the industry. I could be billing within 2 weeks if I moved fast. The medical situation required a doctor, which required insurance, which I had maintained independently since I turned 22, specifically because I never wanted my healthcare contingent on a PACS coverage. Smart, past Elliot, genuinely prescient. The prenatal piece was a different kind of complicated. Multiple alpha pregnancies in an omega were not unusual in the Omegaverse biological sense. The genetic sorting happened naturally. Each twin would carry markers from one alpha, but the legal and social architecture around PAC paternity acknowledgement was a maze I had not budgeted emotional energy for yet. I was going to need a lawyer at some point, a good one. I added that to the list. I also added, eat something, because the coffee had woken up a hunger that was now making itself known with real conviction. I was halfway through mentally composing a grocery list when my door opened. I was on my feet before the thought fully formed, coffee in one hand, and the door had not been locked because I had not yet figured out the deadbolt on the new key, and I had been planning to sort that out in approximately 10 minutes. It was not an intruder. It was a small boy, maybe 5 or 6, round-faced and very serious, wearing a jacket 3 sizes too large, with the sleeves rolled up, holding a paper plate with 2 pieces of toast on it, covered in what appeared to be peanut butter applied with enormous enthusiasm. He looked at me. I looked at him. "Rena said you didn't have food," he announced, with the gravity of someone delivering an official report. "Rena is very well informed," I said. "She's my grandma," he said. "I'm August." "Elliot," I said. August looked at the two folding chairs facing the window with the focused assessment of a very small person encountering new information. "Why do you have two chairs and no table?" "Minimalism," I said. "It's a design philosophy." He considered this. Then he walked over and set the toast on the seat of the empty chair with extreme care, like he was placing something important in a museum, and turned back to look at me. "Cole said you bumped into him," August said. I had underestimated the communication network of this particular block. He was standing in the middle of the sidewalk. "He does that," August said, with the resigned familiarity of someone who had witnessed this multiple times. "He thinks when he walks, and then he just stops. Grandma says he needs a keeper." "Your grandmother is a wise woman," I said. August nodded, apparently satisfied, and walked back toward the open door. Then he stopped and looked at my gloves with the direct, unfiltered curiosity that only children and certain kinds of psychometric omegas could get away with. "How come you wear gloves inside?" he said. "Because my hands get cold," I said. He thought about this. "Cole says that too." I went still. "Cole wears gloves?" I said, careful, keeping my voice light. "Not like yours," August said. "His are different. He wears them when he doesn't want to feel things." He said it the way children said true things, casually, without any awareness of the weight they were placing in the air. "He says some things are too loud." The psychometry in my fingertips went very, very quiet. The specific kind of quiet that happened right before something important. I looked at the empty chair with the toast on it, then at August, who was watching me with those serious round eyes. "Your toast is going to get cold," he said helpfully, and walked out, pulling the door mostly closed behind him with both hands and considerable effort. I stood in the middle of my empty apartment. Outside the window, Wooster Square was going about its morning. The jogger had come back around. The kid on the bike had stopped by the fountain and was crouching to look at something in the dry basin. Cole Mercer wore gloves because some things were too loud. I sat back down in my chair, picked up the toast, took a bite. Peanut butter, slightly excessive, applied by a 6-year-old named August, and it was the best thing I had eaten in 6 days. And I sat there in my empty apartment eating it with both gloved hands and looking out at the square, and felt something inside my chest do a thing I was not prepared to name yet. So naturally, I did what any reasonable person did when confronted with an inconvenient emotion in an empty apartment. I finished the toast and made a professional to-do list. I had a system for this. Anytime my internal landscape got too loud, I built something external to organize around. A list, a structure, a set of clear, achievable steps that created the comforting illusion of control. My therapist back in Denver, a beta named Dr. Anila Rowe, with reading glasses and zero tolerance for avoidance tactics, used to call it productive dissociation. I called it staying functional. The list so far: contact Meredith Bale at Hartford Regional Insurance. Reach out to former client Thomas Owsley, who owed me a referral. Find a primary care physician accepting new patients in New Haven. Schedule prenatal intake appointment. Figure out the deadbolt situation. Buy groceries with $41. Locate the cheapest possible air mattress in the greater Connecticut area. I was halfway through typing this into my phone when the psychometry hit. Not the low background warmth I had been managing since the gas station. This was the other kind, the sudden kind. The kind that happened when my bare skin made accidental contact with something that had absorbed a significant amount of emotion at close range and recently. My left glove had slipped at the wrist while I was typing, and my bare forearm was touching the wall beside me. The vision came in fast and bright, like a light turned on in a dark room. A man sitting on this floor, this exact floor, wood boards, the same pattern of grain, sitting with his knees up and his back against this wall and his face turned toward the window, with an expression I recognized the way you recognize your own reflection unexpectedly. Not sadness exactly, something quieter and more total than sadness. The look of a person who had run out of the energy required to pretend they were fine. His hands were in his lap, bare, and they were shaking slightly. He was an alpha. I could feel that even through the vision, the particular weight of suppressed dominance that alphas carried when they were trying not to project, trying to make themselves small. This one was very good at it, and it was costing him. The emotion that came with the image was not grief. It was closer to shame. Dense and old and carried a long time. The kind of shame that had stopped being acute and become architectural. The vision dissolved. I yanked my arm off the wall and pushed the glove back up my wrist with hands that were not quite steady. I sat very still. The man in the vision had been Cole Mercer. I did not know how I knew that with certainty. I had not seen his face clearly, but the shape of him, the specific way he held himself when he was carrying something heavy, the deliberate smallness of it, I recognized it from 40 minutes on a sidewalk, in a doorway conversation, and the way he had handed me coffee and stepped back, always precisely far enough back to make it clear he understood the concept of space. Cole had sat on this floor, in this apartment, and he had felt ashamed of something in a way that had soaked into the wall like water into old wood. I pressed both gloved palms against my thighs and looked at the window. Outside, Wooster Square continued being completely unbothered by my personal complications. The thing about psychometry was that it never lied. It could be incomplete. It could be stripped of context. A single emotional imprint without the story around it was like one page of a book, true as far as it went, and potentially very misleading about everything else. The shame I had felt from Cole's imprint could have belonged to any number of situations. It was not my information to interpret without the rest of the chapter. But it sat in my chest now, the way absorbed emotions always did, like something I had agreed to hold for a stranger who did not know they had handed it to me. My phone rang. I looked at the screen with the specific dread of someone who had blocked 3 numbers and was acutely aware there were other numbers they had not thought to block. It was a number I did not recognize. Denver area code. I let it ring. A voicemail notification appeared 30 seconds later. I should not have listened to it. That was the correct choice, and I knew it while I was pressing play with my thumb like a person who had learned nothing from any prior experience. The voice was not Marcus, not Jasper. It was a woman, older, precise, with the kind of measured tone that came from years of controlling a room. Elliot, this is Vivian Callaway, Marcus's mother. I imagine you're surprised to hear from me. I won't waste your time with pleasantries. A breath. I know what you heard, and I need you to understand that you did not hear what you think you heard. I'm not asking you to come back. I'm asking you to listen. There are things about my son's situation you were never told. Things I should have told you myself, months ago, and did not, which is a failure I own entirely. Another breath, slower. Please call me back. What's growing inside you deserves the full truth before you make permanent decisions. That's all I'm saying. The voicemail ended. I sat there. Vivian Callaway, who had met me exactly twice in 4 months, both times at pack gatherings where she had watched me with an evaluative stillness that I had read as disapproval and apparently had not read correctly at all. What's growing inside you? She knew. I pressed the heels of both gloved hands against my eyes and breathed. How she knew was a question for a different moment. Whether I called her back was a question for a different moment. The fact that she had said, "You did not hear what you think you heard," was the kind of sentence that should have been easy to dismiss. The kind of thing people said when they wanted to reframe a situation in their favor. And I was aware of that, and I was choosing to put it in a box labeled "Not Yet" and set it on a very high shelf. The deadbolt, I decided. I was going to figure out the deadbolt right now. I crossed to the door, crouched in front of the lock mechanism, and looked at it with the professional focus of someone who evaluated structural systems for a living. The bolt was stiff from disuse, the kind of thing saw by a specific turning sequence rather than force. I worked it back and forth carefully with gloved fingers until it clicked smooth. There, fixed. I stood up. Someone knocked. I closed my eyes briefly. "Who is it?" I said, with the tone of a man who was no longer surprised by anything. "Cole." A pause. "I also have your mail. It got mixed in with mine somehow. Rena's building has one cluster box and the slots are not clearly labeled." I opened the door. Cole Mercer stood in the hallway, holding a small stack of mail and looking at me with those careful eyes. And something about the angle of the light in the hallway, the way it came over his shoulder and lit the left side of his face, made the image from the psychometry vision slide directly over him like a transparency. Him on this floor, that weight in his hands. I looked at him and he looked at me, and for a second, neither of us said anything. And in that second, my ability was absolutely screaming at the glove line of my right hand. "You lived here," I said. It came out before I decided to say it. Cole went still. Not defensive still. More like a person who had been carrying something they had not expected anyone to notice, and had just felt the weight shift. "For about 8 months," he said, quiet. "Last year." "Why did you leave?" He was silent for a beat. His jaw moved slightly. "It was time." I looked at him. He did not look away. "The shame," I said, and then stopped, because I had absolutely no right to say that, and also no way to unsay it. Cole's expression changed, slow, like a tide pulling back. Not hurt exactly, something more complex. "What did you just say?" he said. I exhaled. "I'm a psychometrist. I touched the wall by accident. I don't try to read people, and I don't repeat what I get, except apparently right now, which I'm going to blame on the fact that I have had a significantly eventful morning, and my filters are not at full capacity." A long silence. Cole looked down at my gloves, then up at my face. "The gloves," he said. "Yes. That's why." "Yes." He was quiet for another moment. Then he held out the mail with both hands, a careful, deliberate gesture, and when I took it from him, I noticed what I had not noticed before. On his left hand, barely visible below his jacket cuff, a thin scar, pale and precise, running along the inside of his wrist in a line too clean to be accidental. Not self-harm. I knew what that looked like, and this was different. This was the kind of scar that came from a medical procedure, or a severing, a bond severance. My breath caught so quietly I was almost certain he did not hear it. A bond severance scar meant Cole Mercer had at some point been marked, and had that mark removed, which was not a simple procedure and was not done for simple reasons. He saw me see it. He did not pull his sleeve down. 14 months ago, he said, as if I had asked, as if we were already in the middle of a conversation that had been going on longer than today. He decided I wasn't what the pack needed. Turned out, I agreed with him. A pause. "I moved here, that apartment, 8 months. He glanced at the door behind me. Then I moved next door. Couldn't quite make myself go further." I looked at him. The shame in the wall. The alpha sitting on this floor with that look on his face. Him, small on purpose, practiced at it. The gloves he wore because some things were too loud. "What does that mean?" I said slowly. "Too loud? What?" "August said you wear gloves because some things are too loud." Cole was quiet for a long moment. "After the severance," he said carefully, "for a while I could feel things I shouldn't have been able to feel. Ghost sensations. Emotional residue, maybe, from what used to be there. Crowded spaces were difficult. I wore gloves for about 6 months." He looked at my hands. "Different reason than yours. Same solution." The silence between us was the kind that had texture. I thought about the wall and his imprint on it, and the weight I had absorbed from it sitting in my chest. I thought about Vivian Callaway's voicemail. I thought about Marcus's voice through a closed door, flat and final. And I thought about 2 lives inside me that had not asked for any of this and were going to need me to be the steadiest thing in their world, regardless. I'm pregnant, I said. I don't know why I said it. I had not planned to say it. It was not strategic or useful, or even particularly relevant to the current conversation. Cole did not flinch. He did not step back. His expression did not shift into the particular complicated arrangement that most people's faces made when an unbonded Omega said that word without an alpha standing beside him. He just looked at me. Present. Even. Okay, he said. Twins, I added, because apparently I was committed to this now. His mouth did the thing. Not the almost smile this time, an actual one, quiet and crooked, and very briefly real. Okay, he said again. I blocked the fathers, I said, all three of them, this morning. Good morning, he said. I laughed. It came out before I could stop it, small and slightly broken and completely genuine, the first laugh I had produced in 6 days, and it surprised me enough that I pressed my gloved fingers to my mouth like I was trying to put it back. Cole was watching me with that steady, careful look, and the smile had gone soft. The eggs are still on offer, he said, if you want to walk over. I looked at him for a moment. Outside, the wind moved through the square, and I heard it through my window. Bare branches brushing bare branches. The sound of November saying exactly what November always said. I want my eggs black, I said. Not with oat milk, not with anything, just eggs. Done, he said. I got my jacket. It took me approximately 4 seconds to locate it because I had one bag in one room and the jacket was on the floor where I had dropped it, which was the entirety of my current domestic situation. I picked it up, pulled it on, checked that both gloves were properly seated at the wrist, and turned to find Cole still standing in the hallway with the patient stillness of a man who was not going to make anything into a bigger deal than it needed to be. That quality alone was doing things to my blood pressure that I was choosing not to examine. We walked down the stairs and out through the black front door into the November morning, and the cold hit me clean and immediate, and I pulled my collar up and shoved both hands into my jacket pockets and walked beside Cole Mercer down the south side of Wooster Square without saying anything, because sometimes silence was its own complete sentence. The diner was on Orange Street, 2 blocks exactly as advertised, a narrow place called Patton's with a hand-lettered sign in the window and 4 booths visible from outside. The kind of establishment that had been in the same location for decades and was not interested in updating its aesthetic for anyone. A bell above the door announced us when we walked in. The woman behind the counter looked up, saw Cole, and pointed at the booth in the back left corner with the automatic precision of someone who had done this before. Usual, she said. 2, Cole said. She looked at me with the frank assessment of someone who had seen Cole walk into this diner many times and never with another person. Black coffee, she said. I looked at Cole. I told her you were coming, he said, which he absolutely had not had time to do, and we both knew it. He called ahead, the woman said, pulling 2 menus she clearly had no intention of giving us. I'm Dot. Sit down. I sat down. The booth was red vinyl, cracked along one edge and repaired with electrical tape that had been there long enough to become part of the upholstery. The table had a paper placemat with a map of Connecticut on it. The coffee appeared in front of me within 30 seconds, black, in a ceramic mug that was slightly too heavy and absolutely perfect. I wrapped both gloved hands around it and felt the warmth move up through the leather into my palms, and for one unguarded moment, I closed my eyes. 6 days of gas station food and bus exhaust and motels that smelled like industrial carpet, and the specific anxiety of moving through the country with no destination and a secret that was getting harder to carry alone. 6 days of performing fine in rest stops and being fine on benches and actually being the furthest thing from fine in the dark. The coffee was hot and real, and I was sitting in a booth in New Haven, and the world outside was gray and cold and completely uninterested in my problems. It was, perversely, a relief. You went quiet, Cole said. I do that, I said, opening my eyes. Different kind of quiet than before. I looked at him across the table. He had taken his jacket off and draped it over the back of his seat, and his left wrist was visible again, the severance scar pale against his forearm, not hidden, not displayed, just existing as part of him, the way all scars eventually did when the person had made peace with what they meant. "How long ago did you leave your pack?" he asked. 6 days. Something moved in his expression, carefully, like he was turning a page. "That's recent." "Incredibly," I said. "Do they know where you are?" "No." "Are they looking?" I thought about Jasper's text. "Are you safe?" The Denver area code on Vivian's call. The missed call from Marcus that I had not let reach voicemail. "Probably," I said, "but I'm not easy to find when I don't want to be found. I've had practice." Cole turned his coffee cup slowly in a small circle on the table. A thinking gesture, unhurried. "Before the pack?" he said. "Foster system until 16, I said. "Group home, then aging out, then 2 years doing assessment work solo, then Denver." I said it the way I always said it, flat and informational. The way you described a route you had traveled rather than a life you had lived, because that was the technique that kept it from landing too hard. "You?" He looked at the table for a moment. "Chicago originally, came up in a mid-sized pack, presented alpha at 19, which my biological father considered a personal achievement of his. Moved to Denver at 24, met Garrett at 26. A pause. Garrett was the alpha who marked me. I kept my face neutral. And the severance? He found his true mate, Cole said, with the particular evenness of someone who had said that sentence enough times that it had stopped drawing blood. 8 months after he marked me, which meant the mark needed to go. He picked up his coffee. I don't hold it against him. Biology is biology. But it turns out being removed from someone's nervous system is not a small experience. No, it was not. Bond severance was legal, medical, and genuinely brutal. The procedure itself took 20 minutes. The recovery took considerably longer, not physically, but in the way the nervous system kept reaching for a connection that no longer existed. Like a missing limb that the brain had not yet filed the paperwork on. "The shame," I said quietly, "in the apartment, that wasn't about him leaving." Cole looked at me. "It was about who you were in that pack," I said. "What you thought it said about you, that you weren't enough to make him choose you." The silence was complete. Dot appeared with 2 plates of eggs, set them down without ceremony, and disappeared again with the professional discretion of someone who read rooms for a living. Cole had not looked away from me. "You got all of that from the wall," he said. "Emotional imprints are specific," I said. "I'm sorry, I should not have said it out loud." "No." His voice was quiet and even. "It's okay." He looked down at his plate. "You're not wrong." I picked up my fork. We ate in silence for a moment, and it was the kind of silence that had changed in quality, the way a room felt different after a window had been opened. Not uncomfortable, something warmer than that. The silence of 2 people who had shown each other something real and were deciding what to do with the trust that created. "Can I ask you something?" Cole said. "You can try," I said. "The 3 alphas." He said it without judgment, clinical almost, giving me the space to answer or not. "Was it a pack bond? Official?" I chewed my eggs. They were, objectively, exceptional. "No, I was a pack associate, not a bonded member, not formally claimed." I set my fork down for a moment, which made it very easy for one of them to say what he said without technically being wrong. Cole's jaw tightened. The first time I had seen him react to something physically. It was brief, controlled, and gone almost before it registered. "What did he say?" he asked. I considered not answering. Then I thought about Vivian's voicemail sitting in my phone like a splinter, and the fact that I had been carrying those 8 words alone for 6 days, and they were starting to weigh more than the twins. The omega means nothing, I said. He is a convenience. Cole set his fork down. He looked at me with an expression I had not seen on his face yet. Something beneath the careful neutrality. Something older and more personal. I'm going to say something, he said, and I want you to know I'm not saying it because I think you need to hear it. I'm saying it because it's true, and you deserve to have it said directly. I looked at him. That sentence, he said, is the most incorrect thing I have heard in recent memory. And I say that as someone who once had a pack alpha tell him his secondary designation made him structurally ornamental. Structurally ornamental. I stared at him. He did not say that, I said. He had a whole philosophy around it, Cole said. PowerPoint and everything. Something cracked open in my chest, and the laugh that came out was completely undignified, the kind that involved my whole face and a noise I would have been embarrassed about in any other circumstance. And I pressed my gloved hand over my mouth, and Cole watched me with those warm eyes and did not laugh himself, but looked like someone standing near a fire and choosing to stay. PowerPoint, I said, still recovering. 3 slides, he confirmed. Transitional animations. I shook my head. That is genuinely the worst thing I have ever heard. It was thorough, he said with a straight face. I'll give him that. I looked at him across the booth. This alpha with his severance scar and his folding chairs and his neighbor's grandson and his instinct to bring coffee to strangers without making it a transaction. And my psychometry was doing something I had no clean category for. Not a vision, not an imprint, something more like a resonance, the feeling of 2 frequencies close enough in register to create a new sound between them. It unsettled me more than the visions did. Visions I understood. I had a protocol for visions. This was something else. I'm not looking for anything, I said, which came out less like a declaration and more like a reminder I was issuing to myself. I know, Cole said. I mean it. I have twins coming and $41 and a list of priorities that does not have room for anything complicated. I know, he said again. I'm just saying. Elliot. His voice was quiet, patient, carrying nothing I had not put there myself. I brought you coffee and let my neighbor's kid deliver you toast. I'm not proposing a merger. I looked at him. But I am, he said, going to be your neighbor. And I am going to be honest with you. And if that turns out to be worth something, that's up to you to decide. I picked my fork back up. Outside on Orange Street, a bus went past, loud and brief. And then the diner went quiet again, and Dot was refilling someone's coffee at the counter. And the paper map of Connecticut on my placemat had a small coffee ring on Hartford. My phone was in my jacket pocket. Vivian's voicemail was still in my phone. And somewhere in Denver, in a pack house in the foothills with tall windows and granite counters, 3 alphas were doing whatever people did when a convenience disappeared without explanation. I ate my eggs. They were the best eggs I had ever had, and I was not going to tell Cole that, because he would make the face, and I was not equipped for the face right now. Under the table, quiet and persistent and warm, the twins shifted. Just barely, the smallest possible thing, like they already knew we had found somewhere to stay. I sat with that feeling for exactly as long as it took Dot to bring the check, which was approximately 4 minutes, and then I folded it up and put it in the box labeled, "Not yet," and got on with being a person who had practical things to accomplish. Cole paid before I could produce my $41, which I objected to on principle. "It's eggs," he said. "It's the principle," I said. "You can pay next time." I opened my mouth to explain that there was not going to be a next time in any planned sense, and then closed it, because we both knew I had just eaten the best eggs of my recent life, and the diner was 2 blocks from my apartment, and Dot had already learned my coffee order, and sometimes the universe just made decisions and had the nerve to be correct about them. We walked back toward Wooster Square in the thin November light, and I had my hands in my pockets, and Cole had his in his, and we walked at the same pace without negotiating it, which was the kind of small physical coincidence that should not have registered and did anyway. "I need to call someone," I said when we reached the corner of the square. "Someone from Denver. It's not one of the three." Cole looked at me with that reading the room quality. "Okay. I've been avoiding it since this morning, and I think I need to stop avoiding it before it gets bigger than it already is. Do you want company or space?" I thought about it. "Space," I said, "but close." He nodded once, easy, like this was a completely normal request to make of someone you had known for 2 hours, and sat down on the nearest bench at the edge of the square with his coffee and his patience and his parallel life of quiet devastation, and I walked 10 steps away and took my phone out. I found Vivian Callaway's number in my recent calls and pressed it before the thinking part of my brain could file a formal objection. It rang twice. "Elliot." Her voice was immediate, like she had been holding the phone. "You said I didn't hear what I think I heard," I said. No preamble. "Explain that." A breath. Not relief exactly, more like someone stepping carefully onto ice they had tested, but not yet trusted. "Where are you?" "Not Denver," I said. "That's all you get." "Fair." A pause. "What you overheard was a conversation between Marcus and his PAC legal counsel, not Jasper, a man named Drew Forsyth who has been with the Callaway PAC for 11 years and who was, at the time of that conversation, pressuring Marcus to formalize a political alliance with the Hartwell PAC. Another pause, slower. The Hartwell PAC wanted to place their own Omega in the Callaway house. An official bond, a strategic arrangement. Drew Forsyth had been pushing it for 2 months. I stood very still. "The Omega Drew was referring to," Vivian said, precise and unhurried, "was the Hartwell PAC's candidate, not you. Marcus was telling Drew that the Hartwell Omega meant nothing to him, that he had no interest in a strategic placement, and that Drew should stop making it complicated." Her voice tightened slightly. "What you heard was my son refusing someone else, not dismissing you." The square was very quiet. A pigeon landed on the path in front of me, looked at me with the blank judgment of a pigeon, and walked away. "You're telling me," I said slowly, "that I ran 1,900 miles on a Greyhound bus based on half a conversation through a door." "Yes," Vivian said. The word landed in my chest like a stone dropped from a significant height. I thought about the bus. Kansas City at 2 in the morning, the Columbus Motel, the gas station bathroom and 3 pregnancy tests lined up on a sink. $41. An apartment in New Haven. Cole on a bench 10 steps away. Twins. Why didn't Marcus tell me about the Hartwell situation? My voice was flat, controlled. The flatness was doing a lot of structural work. "Because Marcus is my son," Vivian said, "and like his father before him, he is constitutionally incapable of explaining himself when he believes his actions should speak clearly enough, which is a character flaw I have been attempting to correct for 31 years with limited success." A beat. "He also did not know you were outside that door. None of them did." "And Jasper?" I said. "Declan?" Vivian was quiet for a moment too long. "Declan," she said, and something in her voice changed register, "has known about the Hartwell situation for 3 months. He has been the primary reason it has not moved forward. He filed 3 separate objections with the PAC legal structure on the grounds that the Callaway PAC already had an unbonded Omega associate whose position had not been formally resolved, and that formalizing an outside bond before addressing that was legally and ethically irregular." A pause. "He never told you because he did not want you to feel like a legal strategy. He wanted you to stay because you wanted to." I pressed my free hand flat against my sternum. Declan, quiet, 28, who left coffee on the counter and always knew where I was in a room without looking. filing legal objections in my name without saying a word about it, standing at his kitchen counter in my psychometry vision with his head down and his hand pressed to the granite like he was holding himself in one place. The vision cracked open with new meaning. He had not been falling apart because I was gone. He had been falling apart because he had been holding something together for 3 months alone and had not told me. And now I was gone, and the thing he had been protecting had walked out the door in the middle of the night. My throat tightened in a way I was actively refusing to honor. You said what's growing inside me deserves the full truth, I said. So I'm going to ask you something directly, and I need you to answer me the same way. Yes, Vivian said. Did Marcus know about the pregnancy before I left? No, she said without hesitation. None of them do. I know because I'm a bonded alpha female with 30 years of reading pack bond dynamics, and I could sense the change in your scent at the gathering 2 weeks ago. I said nothing because it was not mine to say. A pause. Elliot, my son is not a perfect man. He is closed off in ways that have cost him people he cared about. But he did not say what you thought he said. And the 3 of them have been searching for you since the morning you left. Searching. The word was a very specific shape in my chest. I blocked their numbers, I said. I know. Marcus called Drew Forsyth in a state I have not seen him in since his father died. Another breath. Jasper has barely slept, and Declan has not left the house. I looked across the square at Cole on the bench, who was looking at the bare trees with his coffee cooling in his hand, and the particular stillness of a man giving someone the space they asked for without making them feel watched. Everything inside me was doing something loud and simultaneous and contradictory. The relief of being wrong pressing directly against the horror of what being wrong had cost. The anger at Marcus for being the kind of man who communicated in silences and expected everyone to read them correctly. The complicated grief of Declan holding a door open for me quietly for months, while I stood on the other side not knowing it was there. And underneath all of it, down at the foundation, the twins, small and certain and already making decisions about permanence. I need time, I said. I know, Vivian said. I am not coming back to Denver right now. I am not calling Marcus. I am not ready for any of that. I understand. But I want you to tell Declan, I said, and my voice came out different on his name, rougher, less controlled, that the legal work he did was not nothing. He should know that. Vivian was quiet for a moment. I'll tell him, she said softly. I ended the call. I stood on the path in Worcester Square with dead leaves skittering past my boots, and the cold pressing in from all directions, and the psychometry burning at my fingertips with the force of everything I had just absorbed in the last 4 minutes. I did not move for a long moment. Then I turned around. Cole was already looking at me, not reading me, not pushing, just present, the way he had been present all morning, like someone who understood that presence was its own form of care. I walked back to the bench and sat down beside him. We did not say anything. The wind moved through the square, and a kid on a bike went past, and somewhere on the far side of the park, a dog barked twice and stopped. I misunderstood something, I said finally, something I left over. Cole turned his coffee cup in his hands. Does that change things? He said. I thought about Marcus's voice through a closed door, the specific flatness of it, the tone that had felt like a verdict. I thought about how easy it had been to believe it, how quickly it had confirmed something I had been quietly afraid of since the first day I moved into that house, that I was there on sufferance, that I was one decision away from being unnecessary. Not because Marcus had said it, because I had spent 24 years being easy to leave. It changes what happened, I said. It doesn't change what I felt when I heard it. Those aren't the same thing. Cole was quiet. No, he said, they're not. I leaned back against the bench and looked up at the pale sky through the bare branches. Declan has been protecting my place in that pack for 3 months without telling me, I said, silently, filing legal objections, doing paperwork. I laughed, and it came out with an edge on it that surprised me. 3 months of bureaucratic devotion and not one word. That sounds like someone who was afraid of the answer, Cole said. What answer? Whether you would have stayed, he said, if he'd asked you to. The question sat in the air between us. I looked at my gloved hands. The honest answer was that I did not know. That 4 months in a pack house with 3 alphas who had never formally claimed me had been the closest thing to belonging I had experienced since before the foster system. And I had spent every day of it waiting for the moment it would be taken away, which meant I had never fully arrived, had never let myself. And then I had heard 8 words through a door and decided the waiting was over. I don't know, I said. That's a real answer, Cole said. My phone buzzed. I looked at it. Not a number I recognized. New Haven area code. I answered it because everything today had been unexpected, and I had apparently decided to simply let the day happen. Is this Elliot Voss? A man's voice, professional, slightly hurried. This is Dr. Marcus Webb's office, New Haven Women and Family Health. We had a cancellation for a new patient intake this afternoon at 2 o'clock. Rena Okafor submitted your name as a referral about an hour ago. I looked across the square in the general direction of Rena's building. That woman, honestly. Yes, I said. I'll take it. I hung up. Cole was watching me. Rena made me a doctor's appointment, I said. She made mine too, he said, the first week I moved in, before I'd even unpacked. Is she always like this? Every single day, he said. And this time when the smile came, it was not careful or restrained. It was full and warm and brief, and it hit me somewhere between the sternum and the solar plexus, with the force of something I had not been prepared to encounter today. I stood up from the bench. My legs were steady. My hands were steady. My chest was a complete construction zone, but the exterior was holding. I need to go make a list, I said. Another one? The old one is outdated. Significant new information has come to light. Cole stood too, easy and unhurried, and we stood facing each other in the middle of Wooster Square in the November cold, and the wind pulled at the hem of my jacket, and I looked at him, and he looked at me, and the psychometry at my fingertips was not reading the past right now. It was doing something it almost never did. It was pointing forward. I took a step back. 2 o'clock, I said. I'll tell Rena you said thank you, he said. I'm not thanking Rena. Rena went around me. She'll take that as a compliment. I turned and walked back toward the brownstone, and I did not look back, and my pulse was doing something completely unreasonable. And the Vivian voicemail was sitting in my chest, rewriting things I thought I knew. And somewhere in Denver, Declan was standing at a granite counter, not moving. And I was 24 years old and carrying twins in New Haven, Connecticut. And the list needed updating, and none of it, not one single piece of it, was simple. But I was walking. That was the thing about being the kind of person who had always had to find their own way forward. You kept walking even when the ground changed under your feet. Even when it turned out the thing you ran from was not exactly what you thought it was. Even when your psychometry was pointing at a future you had not planned for. And a man on a bench who wore gloves for different reasons than you did, and left folding chairs outside your door without making it a gift. I kept walking. The key to number 14 was in my jacket pocket, warm from my body heat, and it was mine. And that was enough for right now. That had to be enough for right now. I made it back to the apartment, sat in one of Cole's folding chairs, and opened a new note on my phone. At the top I typed, "What is actually true?" Then I sat there for a full minute staring at those 4 words, because I had built my entire morning on a version of events that Vivian Callaway had just quietly dismantled with 2 minutes of measured explanation. And now I had to figure out what the structure looked like without the wall I had been leaning on. What was actually true? Marcus had not called me a convenience. He had called someone else irrelevant, and I had been standing in the wrong place at the wrong time, with my whole nervous system primed for confirmation of my worst fear, and I had confirmed it with the efficiency of someone who had been practicing that particular misread for 24 years. Declan had been protecting me silently and thoroughly for 3 months and said nothing. Jasper had asked if I was safe before he asked where I was. I had blocked all 3 of them and run to Connecticut, and was now sitting in an empty apartment with 2 folding chairs and $41 in twins. I looked at the list. "Okay," I said to the empty room. "So the villain origin story has a continuity error." The room did not respond, which was becoming a pattern in my relationship with this apartment. I kept writing. What was also true, even if I had misheard, I had still felt what I felt. The floor had still dropped out from under me. The belief that I was disposable had been right there, immediately available. No convincing required. That did not happen to people who felt secure. That did not happen to people who had been shown clearly and consistently that they mattered. It happened to people who had been waiting since age 7 to be told they were enough and had never quite gotten there. Dr. Rowe would have had something precise and useful to say about this. She would have said it without dramatics, in her measured beta voice, with those reading glasses and her complete absence of tolerance for the stories I told myself to make the fear manageable. I missed Dr. Rowe with a sudden sharpness that surprised me. I added her to the list. Find a therapist in New Haven, non-negotiable. Then I added the item that had been sitting at the bottom of the list since Vivian's call, the one I had been arranging other items on top of, like furniture stacked against a door. Call them back, or don't, but decide. I stared at that line. The decision was not actually about whether I had misheard. It was not even about whether Marcus or Jasper or Declan were good men or bad ones, whether they deserved the benefit of the doubt or a registered letter from a lawyer. The decision was about the thing Vivian had named without naming it directly. I had been in that house for 4 months as an associate, unbonded, unformalized, close enough to feel the warmth, but technically outside the door. And I had been fine with that. I had told myself I was fine with it because I did not need the formal structure, because I was independent, because I had managed without a pack for years and did not require the validation. I had said this to myself with great conviction while quietly arranging my entire emotional life around 3 men who had never once asked me what I needed. Not because they were cruel, because I had never told them what to ask. That was the thing burning in my chest right now. Not anger at Marcus or grief for Declan, or the complicated tenderness I still felt for Jasper's 3 a.m. text. It was something older and quieter and more mine. I had been in that house for 4 months, and I had never once said, "I need you to claim me," or "I need you to let me go." I had waited for them to decide. I had made myself small and easy and low maintenance and waited. 24 years old, and I was still running the same program I had installed at 7. I closed the note. Then I opened the contact I had unblocked 3 minutes ago while I was walking back from the square, in the specific way you did things when you knew you were going to do them and wanted to move fast before your own caution caught up. Declan's number. My thumb hovered. The psychometry pulsed. Not a vision. That resonance again, the frequency thing, closer and more specific than this morning. I pressed call. It rang once. Elliot. His voice hit me like walking into a warm room from the cold. Low and immediate, like he had been sitting right next to his phone. And the way he said my name had no performance in it at all. No relief layered over carefully. No careful architecture. Just the word, and the fact that it was my name, and the fact that he said it like it had weight. I did not say anything for a second. "Hi," I managed. Silence on his end, the kind that was not empty. "Are you safe?" he said. Not "where are you?" Not "why did you leave?" Not "come home." "Are you safe?" Same question as Jasper. I understood something in that moment about the three of them that I had been misreading since the beginning. They were not a monolith. They did not speak in the same voice, or want the same things, or process the world through the same architecture. But this, the safety question first, before anything else, that was something they shared. Yes, I said, I'm safe. A breath on his end, long and slow, the kind that had been held for days. Declan, I said, I know about the objections, the legal filings, the 3 months. Silence. Vivian told you, he said. Yes. Another silence. This one was different, heavier. I wasn't trying to control anything, he said quietly. I wasn't trying to make a decision for you. I just needed there to be a door left open long enough for you to decide if you wanted to walk through it. My throat did the tightening thing again, and this time I did not fight it as hard. Why didn't you tell me? I said. Because, he said and stopped. I could hear him breathe. Because every time I thought about telling you, I thought about what you would do with it, and I thought you would leave. I closed my eyes. You thought if I knew you wanted me to stay, I said, I would run. Yes. Declan, I know. That is the saddest and most accurate thing anyone has ever said about me. A sound on his end, not a laugh exactly, something softer. I know you, Elliot. I've been watching you hold yourself at arm's length from everything in that house since the day you moved in. Like you were visiting, like you were ready to leave at a moment's notice. Because I was, I thought. I always was. That was the whole system. Where are you? He said, quiet. Not demanding, just asking. Connecticut, I said. A pause. That's specific. It was meant to be. Okay. He did not push. Are you coming back? I pressed my gloved hand flat against the wall beside me, and the wood was cool through the leather, and I did not take the glove off, and I did not try to read anything from it. Some things I wanted to approach with just my own feelings for once, unassisted. I don't know, I said honestly. I need to tell you something first, something that changes the picture. Tell me, he said, no hesitation. I'm pregnant. The silence was total. 5 seconds. 10. Declan, I'm here. His voice was different now, not shaken. More like a man who had just had the ground shift under him and was checking that his legs still worked. Pregnant. Twins, I said. I found out this morning. Well, I confirmed this morning. I've suspected for about 3 weeks. Another breath. Twins, he repeated, the word careful in his mouth, like he was learning the shape of it. Genetically multiple alpha, I said, keeping my voice clinical, informational, using the tone I used when I was delivering structural assessments to clients who were not going to like what they heard. Which means they are biologically yours, all 3 of yours, 1 each with a third carrying mixed markers, standard Omegaverse multiple alpha genetics. Elliot, he said, I'm not calling to ask for anything, I said quickly, because I needed to get this part out before he said something that broke my clinical tone entirely. I'm calling because Vivian said I deserved the full truth before I made permanent decisions, and she was right. So I'm telling you, that's all. You can tell Marcus and Jasper when you're ready. I just needed you to know. You called me first, he said. Yes. Not Marcus, not Jasper. No. The quiet between us was different from the other silences today. This one had the texture of something being carefully held. Can I ask why? He said. I looked at the window, the square below, ordinary and still. A woman with grocery bags crossing the path. The fountain basin full of leaves. Because, I said, you stood in a room for 3 months holding a door open for me without telling me it was there. And I think that deserved a phone call. I heard him exhale. It was the longest exhale I had ever heard from a person trying not to fall apart on a phone call. I need to sit down, he said. You're already sitting down, I said. A pause. How do you know that? Because you're always sitting at the kitchen counter at this time of morning. You have the stool pulled out and your coffee is on your left, and you have one hand flat on the granite. Silence. The psychometry, he said slowly. Vision, I said. A few days ago, I touched a wall by accident. Another silence, and this one was a new kind, something unfolding in it, something I could feel even through the phone. I've had my hand on this counter for 3 days, he said quietly. Like if I stayed still enough, the house would tell me where you went. The tightening in my throat became something I could not narrate around. It doesn't work like that, I said, and my voice came out rough at the edges. I know, he said, but I didn't have a better plan. I pressed my free hand over my eyes. This was the problem with Declan Harlow. He said things like that without any apparent awareness of what they did to a person, with the same calm directness he used to leave coffee on counters. Like devotion was just a fact he was reporting. I'm not ready to talk to Marcus, I said. I know, and I need more time before I make any decisions about anything. Take it, he said. Take all of it. Declan, I dropped my hand from my eyes. Tell me one thing. Honestly, did he know I was listening? Marcus, that day. A pause that told me more than the answer. No, Declan said. He didn't. But Elliot, there's something else you should know about that conversation. Something Vivian probably didn't tell you because she doesn't know the full version. My chest tightened. What? The reason Marcus was so flat about it, so final, Declan said carefully, Forsyth wasn't just pushing for the Hartwell placement. He was threatening to use your presence in the house to destabilize the pack structure. He was saying that an unclaimed Omega associate was a liability, a complication. Marcus shut it down the only way he knew how in that context, which was to make it sound like you didn't matter. I did not speak. It was the wrong move, Declan said. He knows that now. Protecting you by making you sound like nothing in a conversation that should have been about choosing you instead. That's Marcus. He gets it backwards. He always has. The wrong move. Protecting me by making me sound like nothing. I thought about Marcus in that room, on the other side of that door, using the flattest possible voice to shut down a threat, not knowing I was on the other side of the wood, absorbing every syllable with 24 years of context that turned it into exactly what I had always been afraid of. The structural irony of it was almost too precise to be real. He had been protecting me, in the worst possible way, using the worst possible words, with zero awareness that I was there to hear it. And I had taken it apart and rebuilt it into the confirmation I had been braced for since childhood. 2 people, 1 door, and the specific tragedy of emotional architecture that did not line up. I let out a breath. I have a doctor's appointment at 2, I said. Prenatal intake. Okay, Declan said. He understood the pivot. He always did. I'll call you after, I said. The smallest silence. Then, okay. Not Marcus, not yet. I know. And tell Jasper I got his text. Both of them. I will. I stood up from the chair. My legs were steady. The construction zone in my chest was still active, but the noise had changed quality. Less demolition, more renovation. Declan, I said. Yeah. The coffee you always left on the counter. I stopped. I knew it was from you. I never said anything because I didn't know how to say thank you for something that small without it meaning something bigger. A pause. It did mean something bigger, he said, quiet and certain. I know, I said. I know it did. I ended the call. I stood in the center of my empty apartment with my phone warm in my gloved hand and looked at the 2 folding chairs facing the window and the rectangle of gray light on the wood floor and the paper plate that August had brought, still on the counter because I had not thrown it away. My psychometry was quiet. For the first time today, genuinely quiet. Not reading, not reaching, not signaling, just present in my hands like a held breath finally released. I looked at the time, 11:47. 2 hours and 13 minutes to my appointment. I had exactly enough time to walk to the nearest pharmacy, spend 17 of my remaining $41 on the 3 most essential items in my current situation, come back, eat something from the bakery on Chapel Street that had been pushing warm air out its door all morning, and get to New Haven Women and Family Health with 4 minutes to spare. I picked up my key and my jacket. Then I stopped at the door. There was a sound in the hallway, not a knock, just footsteps, specific and familiar, stopping outside my door. Then the soft sound of something being set down on the floor. Then the footsteps retreating. I waited 5 seconds and opened the door. A paper bag from the bakery on Chapel Street, still warm. A sticky note on the front in handwriting that was not Rena's and not August's. Figured you hadn't eaten since eggs. Not a thing, just bread. I looked down the hallway, but Cole was already gone. I picked up the bag. Inside, a sourdough roll and a small container of honey butter, and a second sticky note at the bottom of the bag that said, "The deadbolt sticks in cold weather. Lift the handle slightly before you turn the key." I stood in my doorway in New Haven, Connecticut, holding a warm bread roll and a note about my deadbolt, and the thing in my chest that I had refused to name since this morning climbed up quietly and sat right behind my sternum, where I could not ignore it anymore. I was not going to name it, not today. Today had already contained enough true things. But I held the bread roll with both gloved hands on the way down the stairs, and out through the black front door and into the November cold. And I did not feel like a man holding himself at arm's length from the world for the first time in longer than I could remember. I felt like a man who was possibly, cautiously, and against all reasonable odds, beginning to arrive somewhere. The pharmacy on Chapel Street had everything I needed and a self-checkout lane, which meant I did not have to make eye contact with anyone while buying prenatal vitamins and a toothbrush and a box of crackers that the pregnancy app I had downloaded between the bakery and the crosswalk was already insisting I keep within arm's reach at all times. The pregnancy app. I had downloaded a pregnancy app. I stood at the self-checkout and looked at my phone screen, which was now displaying a diagram of twin fetal development at 8 weeks, with the cheerful, informational energy of something that did not understand the full context of my situation. And I thought, this is my life now. Crackers and diagrams and a folding chair in Connecticut. And then, quietly and without my permission, and maybe something else too, I checked out. I ate half the sourdough roll on the walk back to Wooster Square, and the honey butter was exceptional. And I did not tell Cole that either, because I was maintaining a consistent policy of not handing him victories. And I went upstairs and put the vitamins on the kitchen counter and sat in the folding chair by the window and ate crackers and waited for 2 o'clock. The appointment was on Wally Avenue, a 12-minute walk from the square. New Haven Women and Family Health was a low brick building with a glass front and a waiting room that smelled like lavender and had good lighting, which I noted as a positive indicator. The receptionist confirmed my name, handed me a tablet with intake forms, and I sat in a chair near the window and filled them out with gloved hands and the focused efficiency of someone who processed paperwork as a coping mechanism. Under emergency contact, I typed, Rena Okafor, building manager. Then I looked at the line for 30 seconds and added a second one, Cole Mercer, neighbor. I did not examine why I did that. The doctor was a woman named Dr. Priya Nair, 40-something, direct and warm in equal measure, with the specific quality of a person who had delivered enough news of every variety that she had learned to hold space for all of it without projecting. She confirmed the twins, 2 strong heartbeats, 8 weeks, everything exactly where it should be. She gave me a printed card with the sound frequencies circled in pen, and I looked at it for a long time without speaking. First pregnancy? She said. Yes, I said. Multiple alpha genetics, she said, reading my intake form without a flicker of anything but clinical interest. Do the contributing alphas know? One does, I said. As of this morning. She nodded. You'll want legal counsel before the third trimester. I can refer you to a practice that specializes in Omegaverse family structure. They're good. Yes, please, I said. She printed the referral. She also printed a nutrition guide, a list of safe prenatal exercises, a recommendation for a therapist in the New Haven area who specialized in Omega prenatal mental health, and a follow-up appointment card for 4 weeks out. I walked out of the office with more printed materials than I had owned in 6 days of travel and stood on Wally Avenue in the November cold and looked at the card with the 2 circled heartbeat frequencies and felt something happen in my face that I did not attempt to stop. Not crying, adjacent to crying. The kind of thing that happened when something became undeniably real and your body needed one moment to acknowledge the weight of it before you picked it up and carried it. 2 heartbeats, mine and mine and mine. I pressed my gloved fingers to my mouth and breathed and let it be real for exactly 45 seconds. And then I put the card in my jacket pocket next to the key to number 14 and walked back toward Wooster Square. My phone buzzed at the corner of Wally and Edgewood. Jasper Reed. Unblocked this morning along with Declan, because apparently I had decided on a policy of managed communication rather than total silence, and my past self had implemented it without fully briefing my present self. I answered it. Hey, I said. A pause, like he had not entirely expected me to pick up. Hey, he said. His voice was careful and warm, the way Jasper always was. That quality of someone making room deliberately. Declan told me. Which part? Both parts, he said. All of it. I kept walking, my boots on the sidewalk, the bare trees, the gray sky doing its consistent November thing. How are you feeling? He said. Physically, I said, crackers are apparently my entire personality now. Emotionally, I am a construction zone with a functional exterior. A sound on his end, quiet and real. That sounds about right. Jasper, I said, say what you actually called to say. A breath. Then, I should have said it 4 months ago. I should have said, Elliot, you are not an associate. You are not a convenience or a strategy or a legal complication. You are someone I want in my life and in my pack, and I should have told you that clearly and directly instead of just hoping you could feel it. His voice stayed steady, but there was something underneath it, something that had been held for a while. I'm saying it now. I know it's late. I know you're 1,900 miles away, and you have every right to stay there. But I needed you to hear it said out loud in plain words. I stopped walking. I was on a residential block, quiet, a maple tree dropping the last of its leaves onto the sidewalk in front of me. And I stood there with Jasper's voice in my ear and the doctor's card in my pocket, and thought about 4 months of him tilting his head when I talked, making room for my words, and how I had received that as kindness and not recognized it for what it also was. I hear you, I said. Okay, he said and exhaled. I'm not ready to talk to Marcus. I know, he knows. He's going to have to actually use his words when that time comes, in full sentences, with context. I have already told him this, Jasper said, with the resigned tone of a man who had been delivering this message for some time. Multiple times, with visual aids. Did you make a PowerPoint? Silence. Why would you ask that specifically? Jasper said. No reason, I said, thinking of Cole and 3 slides with transitional animations, and I bit the inside of my cheek to hold back the smile. I'll call him when I'm ready. Not today. Whenever you're ready, Jasper said, we'll be here. We'll be here, not come back, not we're waiting. We'll be here, like a door held open with no deadline on it. I had a doctor's appointment today, I said. 2 heartbeats. Everything's okay. The sound Jasper made on the other end of the phone was very small and very complete. The sound of a person receiving news their whole body had been braced for without knowing it. 2, he said. 2, I confirmed. Elliot. I know. I need a minute. Take it. I heard him breathe. Once, twice, 3 times. Okay, he said finally, rough at the edges. Okay. I'll call you tomorrow, I said, or you can call me, either way. Either way, he agreed. I ended the call and stood under the maple tree for another moment, leaves falling around me in slow, irregular intervals. And then I walked the rest of the way back to Wooster Square. Cole was sitting on the bench again. He had a book this time, open in his lap, but he was not reading it. He was looking at the fountain basin, and there was something in his face that was unguarded in the way faces got when people did not know they were being observed. He looked like a man who was quietly, carefully hoping for something he had not let himself name yet. I recognized that expression because I had been wearing some version of it since I was 7 years old. I walked over and sat down beside him. He looked up, closed the book without marking his page, which told me he had not been reading it at all. How was the appointment? He said. 2 heartbeats, I said. Strong. Everything's normal. Something moved across his face, warm and real and carefully contained. Good, he said. That's really good, Elliot. I looked at the fountain basin. The leaves in it had shifted in the wind, rearranged into a new pattern since this morning. I called Declan, I said. How did that go? He had his hand on a granite counter for 3 days, hoping the house would tell him where I went. Cole was quiet. And Jasper called me on the way back, I said. He said the things that should have been said 4 months ago, in plain words, without waiting for me to intuit them. That sounds like something worth hearing, Cole said. It was. I pulled my jacket closer. I'm not going back to Denver, not right now. I have a life to build here first. A real one, stable income, prenatal care, a therapist, furniture that is not 2 aluminum folding chairs. The chairs are good chairs, Cole said. The chairs are fine, I allowed, but I'm going to need a bed at some point. The twins are going to need a room. I have a list. You have several lists, he said. I contain multitudes, I said. The point is, I'm staying in New Haven, in that apartment, and I am going to figure out what I want, slowly and on my own terms, which is something I have never actually done before because I have spent most of my life making myself convenient for situations rather than building something that was mine. Cole turned to look at me. That's a significant thing to know about yourself, he said. It came with a significant morning, I said. We sat for a moment. The wind moved through the square. Somewhere on the far side, August appeared on his bike, red jacket, doing his loops around the dry fountain with the dedicated focus of a child with a mission. Cole, I said. Yeah, the shame in the wall. I kept my eyes on August in the fountain. You're not that person anymore. Whatever he thought about himself in that apartment, you're not him. The silence that followed was the longest one of the day. I felt Cole turn to look at me, but I did not turn to look at him, because some things were better said to the middle distance, without the full weight of eye contact making them harder to hold. I'm working on it, he said finally, quiet and honest. I know, I said. Me too. August had spotted us. He redirected his bike with aggressive commitment, pedaling hard across the path, and skidded to a stop approximately 3 inches from my knees with the precision of a child who had excellent instincts and no concept of personal space. Did you eat the toast? He demanded. I did, I said. It was excellent. August looked satisfied. I made it myself. Grandma supervised, but I did the spreading. The spreading was generous, I said. Professionally generous. He nodded, accepting this review. Then he looked between me and Cole with the frank, unfiltered assessment that only 6-year-olds and certain therapists could get away with. Are you friends now? He said. We're working on it, I said. Cole made a sound beside me that was not quite a laugh, but was in the neighborhood of one. August considered this. Grandma said Cole needs a keeper and you need someone to feed you. So that works out. August, Cole said with the tone of a man who had been roasted by a 6-year-old before and had not yet found a counter-strategy. I'm just saying what Grandma said, August said, with the defensive righteousness of a child reporting facts. Then he pushed off on his bike and circled back toward Rena's building, red jacket bright against the gray afternoon. I looked at the fountain basin. Cole looked at it too. For what it's worth, Cole said after a moment, I don't think you need a keeper. Good, I said. But if someone were theoretically going to make sure you ate real food and knew about the deadbolt and had a second folding chair, he said carefully, I would not consider that a burden. I turned to look at him. He was already looking at me. Those dark, careful eyes, the severance scar visible at his wrist, the pine resin scent quiet in the cold air, not asserting anything, just present. My psychometry was doing the forward-pointing thing again, warm and insistent at my fingertips. I had told myself all day that I was not going to name the thing in my chest, that today had enough true things in it already, that I was a man with $41 in twins in a construction zone where my emotional architecture used to be, and I did not have capacity for one more significant development. And then Cole Mercer sat on a bench in November and said he would not consider it a burden in that quiet, specific way of his. And the thing in my chest climbed all the way up and said, you already know what this is. I did know. I had known since the oat milk coffee, since the toast, since he did not flinch when I said twins. I was not ready to say it out loud. That was fine. I had a whole life ahead of me to figure out the saying part, but I stopped pretending I did not know. I'm going to call Marcus tomorrow, I said. Cole nodded. And I'm going to take my time deciding what happens next with the pack. Months probably, maybe longer. That makes sense, he said. And I'm going to be very busy with the lists and the job and the prenatal appointments and the therapist and the furniture situation. Very reasonable, he said. So whatever this is, I said, gesturing vaguely between us in a way that encompassed the entire morning, it has to be slow. Slower than slow. Geological. The corner of his mouth pulled, the almost smile, warm and patient. I'm familiar with slow. And I need full transparency. No silences that are supposed to speak for themselves. No doors held open without telling me they're there. Agreed, he said. And I still think you should have been watching where you were going this morning. You walked into me, he said. You were standing in the middle of the sidewalk. I was thinking. Think on the side, I said, and he laughed. A real one, low and full, the kind that changed the whole shape of his face, and it hit me the way the eggs had, and the bread had, and the note about the deadbolt had, like something landing in the exact right place it had always been meant to go. The afternoon light shifted, the pale sun moving behind clouds, turning Worcester Square silver and still. August was a red dot disappearing around the corner of the brownstone. The bare trees held their lines against the sky with the patient permanence of things that had been through winter before and knew what came after it. I sat on a bench in New Haven, Connecticut, 8 weeks along, twins, strong heartbeats, one apartment with 2 folding chairs and a deadbolt that lifted slightly before you turned the key. A job to rebuild, a list to execute, a call to make tomorrow to a man who had protected me by making me sound like nothing and would need to learn a better language. And I was going to require that of him, clearly and directly, in full sentences. 3 alphas, 3 states away, who were, each in their own flawed and human way, standing at different points of the same realization, that they had held things carefully that they should have said out loud. A neighbor with a severance scar and a borrowed laugh, and folding chairs in the specific quality of someone who understood that presence could be offered without being imposed. And 2 heartbeats, small and certain and already decided. I reached into my jacket pocket and touched the doctor's card with my gloved fingers. 2 circles, 2 frequencies, 2 lives that had chosen me even when I had not quite chosen myself yet. I was going to choose myself now. That was the plan. That was the whole plan, actually. Underneath all the lists and the practicalities and the careful management of every feeling that got too large. Choose yourself first. Build the thing that is yours. Let people in the door on your own terms. Stop performing convenient for situations that have not earned your full arrival. Stay. I'm hungry again, I said. Cole stood up from the bench without drama. Dot closes at 4. Then we should move. We walked out of Wooster Square side by side in the silver afternoon light, and the November cold was still personal and still finding the gap between my collar and my jaw. And I still did not love it, but I pulled my collar up and walked, and my footsteps were even, and my hands were steady in my gloves. And somewhere in my chest, 2 small things were doing what they had been doing since this morning. Staying. Just staying. Like they had always known we were going to be fine. Like they had known it before I did. And maybe, I thought, walking down Orange Street toward a diner where someone already knew my coffee order, toward a life I was building from scratch in a city that had not asked for me, but had let me in anyway, with a doctor's card in my pocket and a list on my phone, and a neighbor who thought on the wrong part of the sidewalk, and the whole, long, complicated road of tomorrow still ahead of me. Maybe they were right. Maybe we were going to be fine. Maybe this was exactly where we were supposed to land.